I understand that they will try to be here with us. So we're going to see. What I see here is all names that I recognize as far as being class.
Before we get started, I do want to make sure that I have at least my representatives from.
Well, you can ask them.
So.
You might want to just come closer on the other side of that and speak louder so that way.
Sure.
That's kind of a weird thing, but this whole semester is weird. So
Yeah.
We can hear.
You can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Lauren.
Okay. And then,
and again, there's the weird semester we were just talking about. Let's see if that will help. Hey, speak again, Alex.
You there?
Is that better?
yeah, that's great.
Okay.
And I just want to take a quick roll to make sure I've got a representative from every team. So, Alex, I see you for Bluefields. Is Stella here?
Stella's right there.
Okay. And then I need either Alaya or Alicia.
Let me expand this just for a little bit and see if I can make it. Hold on. Oh, that's the wrong expansion.
No, Alaya or
This
Alicia.
is what we have so far.
Okay.
It's like the Brady Bunch.
Alaya sent me some talking points earlier, and I think what we might have to do is I will just have to have those up in the event that she is not logged on. Okay. And then as far as my other teams, let's see. Do I have a representative? I've got my Umbarara here. So that's 4. Turkana, where is Tyler? There he is.
Yep, I'm here.
And San Salvador.
Nobody
So
ever looks.
I'm
Nobody
here.
ever looks like I expect them to. I was looking at Tyler Beck and I was thinking, I had this whole different picture in my head of what he would look like.
So El Salvador is here, San Salvador. It just came
Okay.
across as Brandy.
Oh, okay, perfect. That was kind of the one I did not know. And then I see Choluteca and Haku and Alana, yours is, I forget which one you are. Alana, which side are you representing?
I am.
Alajuela?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so.
Dr. Gertis, you can hear me, right?
What? No, I heard you.
Okay, perfect.
Well, then let's go ahead and get started.
Let's get ready to rumble. That's not the right starting point, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me put this over here. I'll put that on there and you may take it away.
Okay. So, not to bore everyone with the process details, but we started out with one of the earlier projects we did was a PERT chart. And just because the PERT chart was so complex, it kind of goes over several slides. It works better in more of an Excel format, but there are a few things that that I think are worth noting here. So we did spend a considerable amount of time doing some team organization early in the process. So we had a number of times when we had to reconfigure. Oh, good, thank you. A number of times we had to reconfigure the teams, and from there, we were maybe a little bit behind on some of the site selection and the roles and responsibilities. We caught up with that, created an organizational chart, and then we formalized our communication plan. And one of the things that involved was determining a cadence for weekly Zoom meetings between the president and the team leaders. So we maintained that cadence throughout the project, and that was extremely helpful. And at about week 3 or 4, we really started to refine that process and decide on some formatting in the deliverables for every week, so that we created templates that would guide every team into a similar format and also to deliver like information so that we weren't having really disparate presentations all thrown together into one. Throughout the process, additionally, we revisited questions with OneWorld Health. So I think there are a couple of slides throughout the PERT chart where it says we talked to check with OneWorld Health again, and we did a number of times have to go back and talk to various individuals who were involved, and then of course also watched the podcast with Dr. Gertis and the leader of the organization so that we could understand a little bit more about what they needed. And so this one kind of snakes around. You can see our more recent work, the SWOT analysis, and you'll see a lot of that come together tonight in this presentation as we sort of combined all the details that we've been compiling over the course of the several weeks. So based on conversations with OneWorld Health and the podcast that we watched, these are the considerations that we were able to determine were important to OneWorld Health. So they are looking for a city with greater than 15,000 residents, and the assumption is that that will translate into a suburban area that then has 30,000 total with the city. So we did not have any sites that did not meet that requirement. Most of our sites were, they were in the $250,000 and higher. Accessibility of public transportation and logistics routes. Of course, that just for the patients to get there and also for supplies. Local churches, this was a kind of nice to have to create partnerships for the international temporary volunteers that the organization sends out to various sites. We wanted to try to find violence statistics and help make good decisions about how to keep OneWorld Health team members safe. Political and economic stability was one of the top 3 requirements that they look for when they're looking for a site. There is another requirement that is not on this list, and it is that the government is willing to have OneWorld Health there. That I understood from Amy was already, they already knew that about every site. So that's right. So when we were looking at the list, there was not going to be a site that we had to worry about that. So I did not include that on here. Right. The ratio of doctors per capita, they were targeting less than 1 doctor per 2,000 people in the population. There are some, we put this on a sliding scale when we graded it. So there are some sites that may have gotten a high score that didn't quite meet this, but they still have a significant need. Disease burden that they felt equipped to treat. So one thing I wanted to note about this one is that in Africa, the disease burden of AIDS is not one that they are equipped to treat. And so if that turned out to be a significant factor in a large percentage of the population, then it was not going to be a great fit for OneWorld Health, because it's not going to be something they can treat a huge percentage. There's a huge percentage of the population that they cannot treat, and they have to refer. So we also wanted an area where there wasn't a super high availability of existing clinics and hospitals. And we worked really hard on trying to figure out a way to decide how OneWorld Health Clinic was going to be sustainable. So what we discovered is that OneWorld Health likes to charge for a general visit equal or less than a day's wages for someone who is making just enough to cover basic needs. What they do is they actually go and survey. They look at doctors who are charging, they're practicing privately already, and they actually will try to charge half. If most of the doctors are charging $10, OneWorld Health would like to charge half. But it was a lot easier for us to find out what was enough to cover basic needs, and so that's what we targeted here. So then, like I said, what percentage of the population makes this much? And then we also found out that the volume of patients, given the monthly budget that we were trying to work with, was less than 1,000 patients per month. And so if at this rate, they need to see more than 1,000 patients to be sustainable, then it wasn't going to work. We also wanted initial CapEx costs of less than $275,000. That is something that comes from the US. It is not part of the sustainability plan of each site. And so we did not necessarily give a site a failing score if they did not have a CapEx under $275,000.
Can you go back one slide?
Can I go back with the mouse? or do
You
have
can,
it?
I can. Okay, to explain CapEx like I've never heard it before.
Sure. So capital expenditures being one-time investment costs that that are needed to, in this case, start the facility.
Mhm.
So building costs and initial planning and labor and all the things that go into
Land,
I'm sorry.
land.
Land, right. So there, we'll see on some of the budget slides that it's actually broken out, and you can see all the different line items that go into it. But basically, it's a one-time cost that's unrelated to ongoing revenue and ongoing outbound expenses.
Okay.
So, and as I was mentioning, we kind of talked about whether we wanted to give the sites a pass-fail on that CapEx line item, but what we decided is if the money is coming from donors in the US, OneWorld Health, if they felt really that it was a compelling argument for this site, would probably be able to raise some more money than $275,000. So we just kind of made the assumption that we don't necessarily have to fail a site just because it exceeds that $275,000 target. So some of our reasoning with the correlation to the scores is valuable here, just so that we could help all of our team members assess things in the same way, and we could come up with a mathematical result that we could rely on. So we have higher economic stability equals a higher score. That makes sense. Disease burden, of course, in Africa, we just had that consideration of AIDS. In general, most of the things did not fall outside of the disease compatibility with what they can do. Sustainability, we wanted to make sure they could see less than 1,000 patients and sustain at their monthly rate. And we weighted all these things based on how important we believed them to be to OneWorld Health through our conversations with them, as well as their own emphasis on it.
Explain the less than 1,000 patients for what? In order to.
So less than 1,000 patients per month at the rate that they at that living wage, whatever is that basic need, 1 day's wage or less is what they could pay. And once we figured out operational expenses in the budget, then we said monthly operational is going to cost this much. If we divide that by 1,000 and that number is not enough, or that people aren't making that much money, then they would have to see more than 1,000 patients at that daily wage in order to operate and to be able to cover those monthly expenses that we determined. From the standpoint, violence, more crime equals a lower score. Higher poverty equals a higher score. So now we did talk about sustainability, and you would think that these might kind of cancel each other out, but also we do want to target a high need area. And given the extremely high population of most of our sites, we felt like we could demonstrate a high need and somewhere where they wanted to go, but also be confident that there were still enough constituents there that they would be able to see enough patients to make this work. So more accessible equals higher score, that makes sense. Lower CapEx equals higher score. More doctors per capita equals a lower score because they're already covered with medical attention. More facilities locally equals a lower score. And then more churches equals a higher score, but that again was just a nice to have. And so we valued that one. We weighted it less. So here's the site ranking. Mathematically, all 10 teams worked together to score all 10 criteria for each site. And then we took, for each of those 10 criteria, we averaged every team's score per line item and then applied the weights that we had given. So we averaged every team's scores to equal, and I don't have the line items until the individual site presentations, but we averaged everybody's score and then we did the weights. And once we weighted the averages of all the 10 line items, these are how they came out. So next up is Alex with Bluefields, Nicaragua. Take it away, Alex.
Hey, everyone. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
All right, awesome. Before we dive into Bluefields, I just wanted to say thank you to Lauren for your leadership and constant communication throughout this project. It was definitely a speedy process, but you kept us in the loop, getting information from OneWorld Health Organization, and that was very much appreciated. So thank you, Lauren, for that.
Thanks, Alex.
But yep, so I'm Alex, and my partner was Lariana Brown. And here you can see the scores from a granular view. We scored highest in our political economic stability, the sustainability, the need and poverty area, the logistics and accessibility within the city. Our disease burden was within scope, the churches within the city. And then our lower scores were on the existing facilities in the area. Obviously, OneWorld Health has a bunch of sites in Nicaragua, but also doctors per capita and violence was a lower score for us. And one of our neutral scores was our CapEx criteria. So we'll move on. I'll tell you guys a little bit about Bluefields. It is Nicaragua's chief Caribbean port, from which hardwood, seafood, shrimp, and lobster are exported. It is also capital of the South Atlantic Autonomous Region. And in Bluefields, there are six different ethnic groups. So it definitely creates a rich culture within the city, but it also multiplies its difficulties. I found an article, I thought this was pretty interesting, from the mayor of Bluefields. His name is Gustavo Castro, and he titled it, Bluefields is first place in all the wrong competitions. And it really highlighted the drug trafficking problems going up and down the Caribbean coast. And Bluefield was definitely experiencing problems with drug traffickers coming in and out of the port. It went on to talk about the percentage of adolescent mothers 15 years older or younger, liquor consumption and the number of bars, venereal diseases, and HIV and AIDS. But with that being said, Bluefields ranks very high with the numbers of church in the city. It has 20 churches in the city, so there's definitely opportunity to build relationships there. But to kind of answer the drug problem in Bluefields, there's a new drug rehabilitation clinic being set up in the city. So hopefully they will be able to resolve that problem in the near future. You can move on to the next. So I kind of wanted to highlight this, the drug trafficking problem kind of stood out to me. Obviously you can see the routes and everything in this picture, but it kind of stood out to me by the amount of money that drug trafficking, it's creating a problem with the violence and everything, but it's also helping out the economy within the city. It says drug traffickers will drop cocaine or pounds and kilos of cocaine off the coast, and locals will actually pick it up on the beaches to help them out, because they end up making a profit from it. And it talked about them making up to $500 a kilo for cocaine found. But it also went on to say in this article, it said you need to understand that most of the local population, particularly in the remote coastal communities, support the drug traffickers, said government prosecutor Suarez. He said they provide employment, and when there are storms and hurricanes, it is the drug traffickers that help the people rebuild, not the government. So I thought that was pretty interesting. You don't know if the drug trafficking is going to go away, with it being such a support economically for the individuals in Bluefields. It sounds like locals are involved in it heavily, but there's definitely an aid. It supports the city when there's weather in the area, such as hurricanes and stuff like that. So I thought that was pretty interesting. An article that I found for Bluefields, Nicaragua. Next, we'll talk about the political stability. It is the government seat for the Southern Atlantic Autonomous Region. The Sandinistas are currently ruling power in the country. The current president is Daniel Ortega, who just completed his 13th year in office. So there is really no political unrest going on at the time. He's been the constant leader for Bluefields. This governmental regime has invested more money towards the development and infrastructure of the Caribbean. So that's a plus. They've also invested in educational platforms, which is definitely needed in Bluefields. They're really building land and highway connections to help the transportation side of things, and that will hopefully improve opportunities for the economy to grow, to reduce isolation and allow more people to get in and out of Bluefields. So we saw that as a plus for OneWorld Health as well. For the economic stability, at least 1/3 of Nicaragua's labor force is engaged in agriculture, forestry, and fishing. This comprises 1/5 of the country's national income. The country's currency is called the Cordoba, and that is issued through the Central Bank of Nicaragua. Agriculture is pretty, and so the poverty rate is pretty high in Bluefields, and you can see through agriculture is one of the main jobs that people rely on, and the soil is very poor in Bluefields, with it being right on the coast. So that definitely limits its opportunities from an economic standpoint, trying to produce agriculture. But overall, as a whole in Nicaragua, the unemployment rate is 7%. And on some sites that we found, it said that the unemployment in Nicaragua had gone up to 70%, or not Nicaragua, but Bluefields had gone up to 70%. So there's definitely a high poverty rate in Bluefields, and a high need area there as well for the clinic. Here are some considerations that we talked about as a group. The availability of public transportation. There is transportation in and out of Bluefields by plane and then bus. And then in the city, transportation is provided by taxis and chicken buses. Like I said, for the churches, there are a lot of churches in Bluefields. There's 20 churches, so there's definitely opportunity there to connect with churches. However, for violence in Bluefields, like I talked about, the drug trafficking problems that are going on. So there can definitely be in the future an uptick in crime as drug trafficking continues, but they are trying to lock that down in Bluefields. But here are some stats. You can take it how you want to, but I just wanted to show that overall crime has gone down in the past 3 years from 2017. So that is a plus for the city. And for the political and economic instability, at present, like I said, there is no political unrest in the city, but Bluefields is deeply impoverished and does have high rates of unemployment. For healthcare, we did it by per capita, like Lauren said, per 1,000 people. In Bluefields, there is about 1 doctor per 1,000 people. You have 1.53 nurses, 0.9 hospital beds, and I found this interesting. The 15 specialist surgical workers in that area, that was more than some other countries. But for the mortality rate in 2016, it was 55.7 per 100,000 people. The average life expectancy for a female was 71.3, and for a male is 66.4 in Bluefields. And here are the 5 leading causes of death in Bluefields. You start, the greatest one is neonatal disorders. Then you have ischemic heart disease, chronic kidney disease, diabetes, and congenital defects. Overall in Nicaragua, there are 32 public hospitals in the country, but there are only 3 in the Caribbean region, and only one of the hospitals is actually in Bluefields. So there are not many health clinics that are in the area. Also from a healthcare standpoint, although the government does provide free healthcare, there are limitations such as like their current delivery models. They struggle with that, an unequal distribution of resources, and also an unequal distribution of medical personnel. So here is our budget. The budget information was definitely tough to find, but we were able to base it off of average costs of living and average salaries in Nicaragua. So as you can see, our budget total was I can't see the bottom. There's 10,000. It's around $10,000 for the operational costs. And we found that the average monthly income for a person in Bluefields is translates to $539 US. And to support the operational costs, an individual or to support their basic needs, an individual must make $20 per day in Bluefields, and approximately about 60% of the population makes this much. And for OneWorld Health to be able to afford the operational budget, they need to see about 549 patients per month to sustain these costs. And then you can see here is our CapEx budget, which we were about, it seemed like we were about middle of the pack. There were some sites that had better pricing than us, but we were able to, Bluefields was able to meet the criteria of $275,000. You can see that most of the costs come from the land and building purchase, and then you have your hiring, your construction, procurement, and operational costs as well, which total up to $275,000. And then here's our SWOT analysis. As you can see, Bluefields received a score of 3.76, and we really felt, I guess as a class, it seemed that the strengths and the opportunities within Bluefields definitely outweighed the weaknesses and the threats. So you can see from a strength side, definitely the accessibility and logistics, with it being Nicaragua's chief Caribbean port. People are able to transport in and out. The disease burdens, these are diseases that are obviously now, but the top causes of death were within scope. Sustainability was a strong thing for Bluefields. The cost of the CapEx budget, and also the political stability, with there being no political unrest. Opportunities, like I said, there was a low availability of health clinics within the area. And I see it, obviously OneWorld Health has several sites in Nicaragua, but you can also see that as an opportunity, as they have a foundation within Nicaragua, so that can be a plus there, turning a weakness into an opportunity or a strength. The churches provide a good opportunity to develop a relationship and help out there. The need for poverty is definitely very high in Bluefields, and the doctors per capita is low as well. Threats wise, obviously drug trafficking, like I said, and that can lead to an uptick in crime. And there also is a high rate of petty theft going on in Bluefields. And then another threat that some places may not experience was the weather in Bluefields, such as hurricanes and stuff, and severe weather that have come in years past that have hurt the Caribbean location. But overall, we felt that our strengths and opportunities outweighed our weaknesses and threats, and we felt that OneWorld Health would be able to plant another clinic in Bluefields, Nicaragua, to help provide and give to the people.
All right, thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Stella, How about Mwanza, Tanzania?
All right, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi everyone, my name is Stella Gaucher and I'm the team leader for the site in Mwanza, Tanzania. My teammate is Yolanda Chang. We are a very small team that had the largest potential site, so the past 6 weeks have been challenging, but we feel confident in the information that we were able to obtain for OneWorld Health. Mwanza, Tanzania came in second place in meeting the criteria that OneWorld Health was looking for in a potential site. According to the group rankings, the team leaders gave Mwanza high rankings in the following categories. Next slide, please. Economic and political stability. Mwanza is the second largest city in Tanzania and is a major business center for neighboring countries such as Kenya, Uganda, Burundi, and Rwanda. The primary economic activities in Mwanza are agriculture and fishing, with a large range of food crops, cotton, and industrial processing of fish being the primary exports. A new president was recently elected, and although the new president has a reputation for being heavy-handed, he has very good relations with the UN and would likely be welcoming of foreign assistance, especially to grow business and industry. Logistics and accessibility. Mwanza's transportation system is already well established. There are currently some major roadways, rail systems, and several public and private airstrips to allow for shipping and receiving of supplies. Additionally, there is also a bus system that provides transportation to the border of surrounding countries for as little as $22 each way. Transportation for in-city travel include motorcycle taxis that are primarily used for short distance transportation needs. Availability of local churches to partner with. Mwanza does in fact offer several local churches in the city that would be a great resource for volunteers. One small concern was that the predominant religion in Mwanza is Seventh-day Adventist, but the beliefs are very similar to that of Christianity, and we don't believe that would pose any problems to the work of OneWorld Health or the recruitment of support. Next slide, please. Disease burden. Mwanza's top 2 leading causes for death are malaria and respiratory diseases, both of which OneWorld Health said they are equipped to treat. Also high on the list of leading causes for death are HIV/AIDS, anemia, and cardiovascular diseases, which could be treated at one of the several existing hospitals in the city. Next slide. Needs and poverty. So this is one area that we believe our rating system might not have completely captured for our site. While the score for our site was high in this category, it might have been based on the actual percentage of citizens living in poverty. In that case, more than 50% of the city's population is living below the poverty level. The concern is that OneWorld Health is looking for sites in which a person would be able to spend 1 day's wages on services. And this would be a challenge for this site, as more than 50% of the citizens in Mwanza make significantly less than the average day's wages. In terms of actual dollars converted from the Tanzania shilling, the cost of living in Mwanza is $633 per month. The average working income in Mwanza is $573 per month, and more than 50% of the population earn less than $547 per month. That being said, this site also scored high in the sustainability category, as the clinic would only have to see 345 patients per month, or 86 patients per week, in order to cover the monthly anticipated operating expenses for this site. Using a day's wages for the majority of the population, however, the clinic would have to see 402 patients per month, or 101 patients per week, in order to cover the cost of operations. Both of these figures do fall within OneWorld Health's goal of less than 1,000 patients per month. Which brings me to the budget category. This site received a 3 out of 5 in this category because while we believe that the startup costs would be able to stay within the $275,000 budget, We believe that the monthly operating costs would be higher than the goal of $6,200 per month. We determined that the average monthly operating cost would be around $7,250 per month. This is based off the average pay for medical personnel in the region. The cost of supplies were also a large line item, as one of the biggest challenges of the healthcare systems in this area is storage of medical supplies. Next slide, please. Now for the areas that received a low score from the group. Existing healthcare facilities. Mwanza does have a somewhat large system of existing healthcare facilities. There are 16 public hospitals, 2 faith-based hospitals, 4 nonprofit hospitals, and 1 public ministry hospital currently available in the city. That could pose a problem for OneWorld Health, as there would be a significant competition and locals might be more comfortable seeking out care in one of the existing facilities. Additionally, several existing healthcare facilities increased the numbers of doctors per capita. OneWorld Health was looking for sites that had fewer than 1 doctor per 2,000 people. Mwanza had an average of 2.21 doctors per 2,000 people and an average of 1.2 additional nurses and midwives per 2,000 people. And finally, our group wanted to ensure that we were not recommending that OneWorld Health start up a site in an area that had a high crime rate or existence of violent crimes. While our team tried to research this information for Mwanza, we were unable to obtain any information on crime in the city. Nationally, however, the crime statistics were very low and included mostly drunken disorderly conduct. So while we were able to make a solid recommendation of this site, while we are unable to make a solid recommendation of this site based on violence statistics, we still feel that given the national statistics, this would be a safe option for a new site. So that is our rating for Mwanza, Tanzania. And Alicia, I'll hand it over to you.
Stella. Alicia or Alaya, are you on the call yet?
Let's see who's here.
Okay. They did send me some talking points. So I am going to just go with those and we will see what we see here.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so as you can see, this is Fort Portal, Uganda, and we collectively scored them very high in political and economic stability, as well as the doctors per capita. There's a huge need here. They had a lot of more neutral scores as compared with other sites, so they didn't have a whole lot of really, really great scores and then a bunch of low scores dragging them down. A lot of their scores really fell into the middle. Excuse me, Fort Portal is a town with high foot traffic, established businesses and banks in the heart of town, with national parks and various landmarks to visit and experience. The low cost in real estate is a strength of this region. However, there are already 4 medical centers established in Uganda, while one of the 5 leading causes of death, HIV and AIDS, cannot be treated, and that makes these weaknesses of choosing Fort Portal as a location. As you can see from this slide, there are 12 churches that they found. The violence statistics were difficult to nail down. Again, this may be something, because the last site was also in Africa, it may be an issue. However, there are already OneWorld sites operating in Uganda, which is also in favor in my opinion, for this site, that it offers some synergy and that OneWorld Health has felt as though Uganda has been safe and stable to this point. With healthcare, you can see this a very large piece of the pie is HIV and AIDS, and so that is going to be a negative for them. Pardon me. However, there are 10,000 people per 1 doctor. The mortality rate is 6.4%. The life expectancy is a little bit younger than we saw in that Bluefields slide. I want to say their males were living to 66 and their females were living to 73. So here we have an average life expectancy of 63 years old. So there are some medical universities there. We had some concerns early on because OneWorld Health has a mission of using only nationals as doctors and staff in their facilities. And we were concerned, is there ever an issue with medical schools producing enough doctors and nurses to be able to staff completely with nationals? So this was really helpful information to have, that we understood there was not going to be an issue. We felt like there would be a good crop of new doctors that we could employ. So there are several hospitals within a 20-mile radius of Fort Portal. That's a big radius, and we didn't really know how far we needed to look outside the city. But a 20-mile commute to a hospital is really far. So this doesn't necessarily speak to widely available healthcare, but it does speak to the fact that people do have some access at this time. So this slide is unfortunately very challenging to read, but they did find that we had received that sample CapEx, and they found that the sample really matched well with what they were looking at in Fort Portal. So as far as the CapEx goes, they landed really right at the same total that we had seen in Nicaragua. From an affordability standpoint, an individual has to make 16,666 shillings or $4.50 a day in order to pay for basic needs. 25% is earning this much. So that is a really depressing statistic, that only a quarter of the population is earning enough per day to be able to cover basic needs. But this is in large part due at the moment to the impact of COVID. So if OneWorld Health, this is such a low rate, $4.50. If OneWorld Health charged today's wage, though, they still would only have to see 777 patients to be able to sustain the operational costs, which are kind of flowing off the page over here. Unfortunately, I can't show you the granular view as well, but I think we can kind of see that overall monthly budget is $5,845. So at that monthly rate, then we can see less than 1,000 patients and be able to cover those ongoing costs. So the opportunities in Fort Portal are better than most poverty-stricken places. There are hospitals like we talked about. There are also clinics in close proximity that offer urgent care. Only 21.4% of the area is below the poverty line, although these are coming from different sites, I think, because it does seem to conflict with the current statistic, which again, I think we said was affected by COVID-19. But in general, 21.4% is below the poverty line. People in Fort Portal can usually, oops, sorry, I put the mouse button on. Thank you. People in Fort Portal can usually live comfortably for their area, and they can typically afford some health care for their families. There are also churches. We touched on that earlier. Fort Portal is Christian faith-based, so and it does help the people with funding, volunteering, community-based assistance to help one another when necessary. There is plenty of access to public transportation. People who don't have personal vehicles to go get care would be able to still get to the clinic for access. It wasn't chosen as the #1 site, but because Bluefields seems to need a clinic more, but it essentially has no crime that's really documented. They're well established politically. It's not very corrupt like a lot of the sites were. It is built like a traditional democracy because the citizens get to vote for their leaders. Having more hospitals and support in the area did make Fort Portal a little bit less ideal because it has more resources already than what appears to be in Bluefields. So comparatively, Bluefields has been experiencing a lot of poverty. Although violence exists, drug trafficking is really the bigger issue, like Alex talked about. And to build a facility in that location could potentially open up jobs for people without provide the necessary life-saving services to locals. So comparatively, there were, this calls out some of the things that that we can draw comparisons to with the site that we won, but certainly it speaks to some of the needs that Fort Portal has, and some of the reasons why we were able to give it a high score. All right, next up is Turkana. Tyler?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Tyler Beck, and I'm the team leader of Turkana, Kenya. And my team contributors were Catherine Carville and Kelly Hall. So a couple of the strengths that I guess made Turkana, we were the fourth chosen site, but a couple of strengths that we had were the disease burden, a lot of diarrhea and lower respiratory infections, which are two things that are treatable by OneWorld Health. Obviously a high number of HIV/AIDS being in Africa, and just the general population that's got that is a major issue. Although that is untreatable, we still felt this was a major strength of Turkana. Another thing we found as a major strength was transportation. There's many different options, such as bus transportation, trains, and then there's a small airport that actually runs through the capital of Turkana, which is Lodwar, Kenya. So we felt that was a strength as well, being accessible. An opportunity was definitely, it's very high in poverty. It's actually the most, it's the poorest county in Kenya. So there's definitely a high need in that area. And then doctor availability, there's only 2 doctors per 100,000 people. So very high availability there for doctors, and a lot of opportunity there for OneWorld Health to potentially step in and take that over. Churches, 20 churches in the largest city in Turkana, which is Lodwar, like I just got in saying. So definitely a great opportunity there as well, being a faith-based area. And also there's a refugee camp that lies in the northwest part of Turkana, but it's called Kakuma Refugee Camp, which has over 191,000 refugees, many of those who are in need of healthcare. And the other issue, I guess, with that is they actually, being in a remote area, it's pretty inaccessible for them to get healthcare. So this is kind of an issue for them, being in the northwest part of Turkana. A major reason why we didn't get chosen here was due to violence. It's a very violent area, one of the most violent areas in Kenya. Our overall score was 2.13, so that definitely hurt our total score at the end here. And crime rates are obviously extremely high, as you can see, with theft stock being 60% higher than the national average, and then murder being also 37% higher than the national average. So 2 of those are major issues that Turkana County deals with on a daily basis, and that would not be a good thing for a clinic to be involved with that. Economic stability, like I just got done saying, it's the poorest county in Kenya. The unemployment rate is nearly 40%. Agriculture is actually the backbone of their economy, and the median income is $389 per month. And unfortunately, 36% of people in Turkana live below these means. Let's see here. CapEx, we had a lot of issues finding consistent land prices. So unfortunately, our CapEx budget was pretty high relative to other sites. With land, I think it was something that we had to find an average of, just because there wasn't a lot of the prices I was able to find were very inconsistent. I'm not sure if that has to do with anything just being the specific area that we're in, or if that's a general problem in Kenya. But that was definitely a reason why our CapEx budget was so high, and another thing that was a weakness for our overall score. Some major threats were there's 4 hospitals within a 20-mile radius of Lodwar. This could definitely hurt our basically our traffic into the clinic, and I don't know if there'd be enough patients, I guess, per se, with all the existing hospitals, as well as in indigenous health seeking practices. Some people choose to not practice Western medicine, and choose to do things on their own. So, again, that's another thing that's a threat to our potential site and a reason why that hurt our overall score. And I can pass it on to the next person.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Tyler. All right, Natalie.
All right, good evening. My name is Natalie D'Alessandro, and my teammates were Garrett Waits and Hannah Price. We had Mubara, Uganda, and Mubara, Uganda is in the southwest corner of Uganda, just to give you a picture, because I'll be talking about that in just a second. Okay, so we scored 5 out of 10 for the different sites, and based on the scoring that we had put together, and I believe that's because we have different ranges. We have some high numbers, we have some low numbers. Most of our higher numbers that are scored in the weights that were lower, so that's why we're probably a little bit lower, and most of our lower scores were in the higher weighted. For example, for political and economic, which we have down there as a threat, but the majority of the information that we were able to find was about terrorism, militants coming into the country from the Democratic Republic of Congo, which, as we saw on the map, is just to the northwest of where the site is. There's also armed raids that are coming in from there. So those are some of the political threats. Additionally, there is a president that's been in place for over 20 years. Some people don't like him, and there's another presidential election coming up in February of 2021. So there has been some talk about protests in the area. For disease burden, which was our second highest weighted category, we scored kind of in the middle. AIDS and neonatal and cardiovascular medical needs are the top things that Mubara has. And as we found out later in the semester, AIDS is not something that OneWorld Health is able to help. So that might be why we scored a little bit lower in that. For sustainability, we are able to sustain less than 1,000 patients per month. It would be at approximately 496 patients per month that they would need to help. For violence, we scored very low in violence because the homicide rate has been going up, and it's not very safe to travel at night, both for traffic reasons and because people get robbed. There is a need, poverty and need. It's about 20% of the people living at or below the cost of living. And for logistics and accessibility, there really wasn't much out there other than minibuses and bikes. They don't have a train, they don't have the large buses. They have one small airport, which is really an airstrip when we looked at it on the map. We did fall under the CapEx, under $275,000. And the doctors per capita we scored pretty high on as a site, because we had 0.168 for every 1,000, which was better than many of the other sites that we have. Existing facilities, there are 4 other hospitals in the town, one of which is a medical school. So if they were to take this site, they would at least have a medical school in the area where they could pull some doctors to come in. And then finally for churches, we scored very high in this, but it was our lowest weighted rank. We had a score of 4.0 because there are 10 churches. And just this summer, a new archbishop was chosen for the Catholic Church. That's all I have.
All right, thanks, Natalie. All right, up next is Chalateca, and I think Crystal is representing for you guys.
Hi everyone, so I worked on Choluteca, Honduras along with Chris. So next slide please. Thank you. So although Choluteca had some very favorable qualities, for example, it was located right on the Pan American Highway, so it increased its availability to receive goods and services during response and recovery activities. It also has a very strong and improving public transportation system. Like I said, it's been recently updated to increase efficiency, and this system consists of secondhand buses actually from the United States that have been imported into Choluteca and the rest of Honduras. Additionally, Honduras has very privileged relationships or relations with the United States and has a preferential trade agreement. Additionally, Choluteca has a nursing school that I think was established around 2017 by some missionaries. Additionally, the government appears to be willing to accept foreign healthcare aid. For example, I believe a few years back, US Army volunteers went to Choluteca for a medical readiness training exercise. and they helped and educated the population on how to treat certain illnesses. Additionally, Choluteca has a very strong Christian presence. I think it has approximately 15 Catholic churches only, amongst many other denominations. So that also helps with the ministry help and assistance. However, we do believe that it had some threats and weaknesses that basically overruled the benefits of Choluteca. For example, since 2012, Choluteca has had very high crime rates and violence rates. So much so that the United States actually issued a cautionary, I guess, issue to travelers going to Honduras in general. And according to recent statistics, there's approximately 4 to 1 homicides for every 100,000 inhabitants. Apart from this, there's also a lot of political instability. The current president, Juan Orlando Hernandez, actually started his second term. And in his second term, he actually created a constitutional reform, allowing him to remove term limits. And of course, this created mass protests and allegations of corruption and accusations of electoral fraud, along with possible allegations of drug trafficking. Additionally, he also tried to privatize the education and health system, which triggered even more riots along the city. Some other weaknesses that Choluteca has is that it does receive 2 different types of of aid from the government. Currently, there are 2 health centers, one of them being the Centro de Salud Rural, which is found sporadically throughout Honduras, and more specifically to Choluteca, it already has a Centro de Salud Médico, which already has, I believe, 1 dentist. There's always a physician on site and along with nurses. And that wraps it up for Choluteca.
Thanks, Crystal. All right. Paco, Costa Rica.
Hey, I'm Sarah Smith. I'm the team leader for Jocko, Costa Rica. My team member was Ben Palmer. So you can switch to the next slide. So in the beginning, we actually thought we had one of the best sites because we had a stable political state and we had a good revenue system, and the unemployment rate was lower than most of the other sites. But we realized that we had a high crime rate compared to the other sites when we actually were able to find the data that we were looking for. And the actual, Jocko is actually isolated from other large cities due to its proximity to the coast. So it's not as easily accessible as other places are, and there are extremely long waits to get medical attention. It is ideal for other business ventures, and it has a welcoming environment with affordable living. And it is close to the capital, as well as the unemployment is relatively low. But there is a lot of alternative healthcare, which is like holistic medicine and witch doctors and stuff like that. It's relatively stable, but there is some instability because the Costa Rican government is wanting to change laws and policies that deter private healthcare facilities from being able to do business. And they do have medical tourism that takes away from the hiring medical professionals that work there. And that's pretty much all that I have.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. San Salvador.
Hey everyone, Erin Miller was our team lead for San Salvador. I am Shauna Lizzie. San Salvador is the capital of El Salvador. First, I'd like to talk about the geography of San Salvador because it greatly did impact whether or not you could establish a location there. The geography of San Salvador was located at the base of a volcano, and because of that, they experienced frequent volcanic activity in addition to earthquakes. So for us to find a location for OneWorld Health Organization to build a facility, it was quite a hindrance in that regard. For economic, value, the Standard & Poor rating rated San Salvador as a B-. And what that really equates to is that a B- indicates a major current uncertainty in being able to pay back your loans. So if you were to pull out a loan to build a facility. Additionally, with economic factors, San Salvador was graded with a high 2019 corruption perception, meaning that there was a lot of corruptness in industries within that sector. Competitive wise, there were four hospitals in total, 2 private and 2 public, that they would have to compete against. On average, there were 100 beds for each location. And the big issue would be in as far as like importing medical equipment. One of the locations of the hospitals actually equated to 19 million in equipment imports. For issues, importing would be a big factor for San Salvador because you have to go through importing it through the Ministry of Health. In addition to that, when you register your medical equipment, it would have to be registered through the National Medical Directorate. For wages, it said that the physicians on a United States dollar annual received $18,000, so wages were low for that area. And 43% of the population, 43% had a deficit of healthcare workers. 45% of the population in San Salvador was unable to provide healthcare insurance for themselves. As far as the local, there was a huge amount of self-harm. The #1 cause of death was self-harm and violence. And for San Salvador, a huge reason why we were not selected was because gangs resulted in 4,000 worth of murders per year. So there was a huge significance of gang violence. And for the region, they are Spanish dominant and they have a large Roman Catholic presence for religion. For the presidency, the new president was elected in 2019 of June, and his name was President Nayib Bukele. He was drastically different from any of the other political leaders that San Salvador has had previously. He's the 46th president, and with that, he has a huge military backing, especially right now with COVID. He is showing more of an authoritarian or a dictatorship type of stance. Now the churches, there's 6 churches in the area, they are very standoffish. He originally had 90% of approval rating, but currently he is throwing a lot of people into prison, and he's issuing like the right to use lethal force to protect yourself, your businesses. So with that being said, San Salvador has some strengths, but the largest weakness was not being able to have a big pooling geographically, having a strong structure facility, and then not being able to protect your investment with the gangs. So without further ado, that would conclude why San Salvador was not chosen as the elected site.
I looked up the 4,000 murders in the place the size of New Jersey. New Jersey had less than 300. So if that gives you some perspective.
Comparatively, wow.
Yeah, and we had Newark and Camden as 2 of our major cities. So I know New Jersey, and so yeah, that's
an
quite a
impressive statistic. Yeah. Okay, Mombasa, Kenya, Max.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Good, all right. Well, I'm Max. I am here representing Team 6B and my teammate Owen Ravenel. And we are reporting out on the site for Mombasa, Kenya. So overall, Mombasa's site ranking was driven down primarily for budgetary reasons, and this is ultimately why we were taken out of contention. We actually received the lowest ranking of all the sites in both budgetary categories related to the sustainability of the operational budget and the cost of capital expenditure. So we calculated that in order to break even and make the site financially viable to cover all operational fixed and variable costs, our clinic would need to see over 1,200 patients per month. And I believe that was one of, if not the highest volume that any other clinic would have had to see. So that correlated to the lowest score in that category, which really drove us out of contention. This is likely due to the fact that our variable costs for direct labor were extremely high. It was extremely expensive to pay physicians, radiologists, and clinical officers to operate this clinic. And we believe that that is due to the fact that there is already such an existence of healthcare in the area. So there are 237 private health facilities in the area, which make the labor market for nurses, doctors, and clinical officials really competitive and kind of drive those costs high. A high cost of land is what really drove the capital expenditure to exceed the site budget of $275,000. And this is due to the fact that Mombasa is home to one of the largest ports in East Africa, which makes it very logistically accessible. And that's a category that we scored well on, but we also have to pay a price for that accessibility, and that drives us over budget. All in all, we believe Mombasa itself will experience a heavy disease burden in the future. This comes as their population is predicted to grow by 28% in the next 10 years. And a lot of that, as Tyler mentioned, he also did a site in Kenya, is due to the influx of refugees coming from surrounding nations that are warring. And these refugees will obviously need affordable healthcare. So with that, our disease burden was scored relatively high. However, there is a strong existing network of public healthcare facilities, mainly clinics. So I believe they have 58 public healthcare clinics in the county of Mombasa, and that is about 5 times the average for the country. So that kind of speaks to the fact that there is definitely a disease burden in Kenya. I would say it is one of the most burdened countries that we have studied in this project. But the county itself of Mombasa is very well equipped to handle that disease burden.
All right, thanks, Max. Last team, Alajuela, Costa Rica.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right, so I am Alana Peters, and my team leader was Kelsey Lambert. So Alajuela does not meet a lot of the requirements for OneWorld Health, although it does meet a few, such as population, transportation, and the unemployment rate. So the crime rate is low compared to other countries, but there is a high level of corruption, bribery, vandalism, and theft. However, the top 6 fatal medical conditions are outside of OneWorld Health's scope. So with the diseases that are within scope, they're readily treated at one of the 65 plus clinics or hospitals within a 20-mile radius. So this results in a 3.68 mortality rate and a life expectancy of 79.16 years, which is a lot higher than a lot of the other regions that we were researching. So due to the pricing of building materials in Costa Rica, to break even, they would have to see approximately 1,100 patients per month, which is higher than the goal of 1,000 patients that OneWorld Health has. The government also replaces obsolete medical equipment, which means the only way to compete with the government healthcare system is for a private clinic to offer faster service. Many Costa Ricans have government-sponsored healthcare, and those who do not are treated for free. So faster service will not be a big enough incentive for them to pay for out of pocket for their healthcare. Therefore, it's highly unlikely for them to meet sustainability. Costa Rica has 7 medical universities, which generate more than enough doctors to serve the public. Their current ratio is 1 doctor to 345 patients, which is a very good ratio. 90% of medical professionals are government employed. So for OneWorld Health to come in, they would probably have to pay more than minimum wage to attract doctors to their clinics, and their monthly costs in Costa Rica are already more than $19,000, which brings their CapEx budget to over $300,000, which is significantly over the budget. And overall, Costa Rica has the 35th best healthcare in the world, which shows that they're very equipped to deal with the disease that they have. Their healthcare is third in South America. And just to put this in perspective, the US healthcare system ranks 36th in the world. So for all of those reasons, this is why Alajuela was not chosen for OneWorld Health.
Okay, so to wrap up, we recommended Bluefields, Nicaragua due to its high need, high sustainability, and its synergy with existing Nicaraguan facilities. And we didn't really highlight a lot of the synergies that would occur, but one of the things that we found out through some of our questions to OneWorld Health is that they operate their own lab in Nicaragua. So in other countries, they would have to outsource all their testing. But in Nicaragua, OneWorld Health actually operates its own lab, and any new site in Nicaragua would be able to rely on some of the existing infrastructure that OneWorld Health has built there. That's not just to do with the clinics themselves. So our other promising sites were Mwanza, Tanzania, and Fort Portal, Uganda. And just to note, I think a couple of people mentioned we struggled to find a few pieces of information, especially related to the budget. And so we just wanted to make clear we used a lot of information to make good inferences about what we think is accurate there. But a lot of these 10 sites represent great opportunities. And in fact, one other thing I will mention before questions is that I have a very good friend from high school and my undergrad at CSU who is now a pastor in Colorado, and he operates a mission called Bread of Life Ministry, and they have been going to Turkana, Kenya for the last 13 years. And they just recently built a small clinic and a church there. And so I already put Amy in touch with him in the event that they do decide to go in Turkana at some point in the future, that he may be able to help assist them with some of his knowledge of the area. So that is what we have. And I had a last slide that just says questions and feedback. We would welcome any questions and or feedback.
Okay, so to my knowledge, I don't think we have a rep here from OneWorld. So I'm going to pass this along to them. That's not a problem. But thank you for your valiant effort on this. I know this was stretching a lot in your ability to figure out where this information is and try to piece it together. But you did a very good job with it on balance. So this is where